Hey, so this is our third weekly practice for our 8-week course, which, by the way, this week I am recording outside. I'm pretty close to a busy street and some construction, so if you hear something um, that's not me, just ignore it. Okay, so for this week, you have a novel reading, just a little excerpt. So um, on Aragon right here, you'll notice that I give you the book cover, I give you the copyright information. I have a green line up here, which is where I would like for you to start. And then I just have a red line here, which is where I would like for you to stop. So just right in between here is what you really need to be looking at. Now, Aragon is a fantasy book that is based really um, a lot like Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I don't know if any of you are fans of either of those, but they have some similar things in common. So you of course can go on the internet. You can watch a bit of the trailer from the movie production, which um,
Our beautiful lands.
the director had a different vision for the story than the writer did. I personally like the book better than I like the movie. But anyway, so you can, of course, find websites where you can watch the trailers if you want a sense. But something that I think is really interesting in interviews, um, people have asked the author, what book should people read next? What were your inspirations? And almost always he mentions Lord of the Rings, which was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, a friend of C.S. Lewis. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia as well, um, but prolific, very big fantasy writer who really changed the way that we do fantasy and mythology um, today. There are a couple articles that I can give you if you wanted to read more about J.R.R. Tolkien and fantasy. Again, so one of the things that I'm trying to do is get you a lot of different exposure to different types of writing that you can do. Um, so, so one of the great things that fantasy does is it takes things that exist in our world, it puts them into another world, and a lot of times it becomes this great battle over good and evil, a lot like westerns do. A lot of horror is this way. It's very much some sort of cosmic. It's mythology in that it's this battle over domain a lot of times, um, and so you know something that both Lord of the Rings and Aragon have in common. So really fast, I want us to look at Lord of the Rings. So this is my copy of Lord of the Rings that I have. This is the front cover. This is the copyright information, and and then I just have a little bit that I want you to look over with me, just for this weekly practice. Go ahead and minimize this so we don't get confused for now. So, you can, of course, this is uploaded onto Moodle for you, but you can, of course, just pause the video anytime you want to read through this, or while I'm talking, read through it, whatever you want to do. So, but to give you a bit of background on Lord of the Rings, so Lord of the Rings, it's all about people are divided up into different races. You have the dwarves, you have elves, you have hobbits, which are these human figures that are just smaller, but not quite like dwarves. Much more humble country folk rather than mountain miners, which is what dwarves are known for. So, Anyway, they're humble creatures. They don't really expect adventure. They thrive on a lack of adventure and a lack of excitement. They are very just normal, average, I suppose you could say. Hobbits are meant to kind of represent just the average human, I would say. So, anyway, so these particular hobbits, these particular people, have been called on an adventure. They have to, if you don't know much about Lord of the Rings, they have to go across. They have to leave their home, go across um, this world to go destroy this weapon. Because if the big enemy gets it, then evil will take over the world. You know, typical gloom and doom stuff. So, anyway, towards the beginning ish, they find themselves they're lost. They're out of this wood. They meet this character named Tom Bombadil. Um, who is quite an interesting character that we won't get into. But what I want you to think about for this particular practice is the language and the tone that is used, because we're not really focusing on visuals right now, although we will look a little at visuals for today in this. But I want you to think about the language. I want you to think about the tone. You know, they're using, you may need to look up some of these words in the dictionary, which is fine. My um, computer comes with a dictionary app that I can open and I can just search terms. Your computer may come with something like that. You may just need to go to dictionary.com. But we get this kind of weird feeling in Lord of the Rings that something is very old, something mysterious is happening. Something is just, this isn't a normal forest. And just looking at this first paragraph here, you see that in the strange noises, the gnarled, knobby faces against the twilight. If we're talking about, the trees there, that gives me an image back to the old Snow White movie. Whenever she is running through the forest and she sees these faces in the trees, whenever she's running away from the huntsman. You have through an ominous dream, and I think that's interesting. They're coming out of this. There's a sense of magic here, in that is this real? Is this a dream? Um, even the water, it seems to be almost just too good to be true. In the darkness, they caught the white glimmer of foam where the river flowed over a short fall. I mean, gosh, that just sounds gorgeous. It's so descriptive here, and I think that's something that I want you to keep in mind for your analysis this week, is that fantasy, a lot of times, um, um, in several ways, fantasy is so wrapped up into describing the landscape. Um, the landscape is a big character in a lot of fantasy novels, a lot of other novels as well. But particularly, I've been thinking about that a lot with fantasy right now, so that's really what's coming to mind. Um, and so the characters get wrapped up in the landscape, and so it is so important that the landscape is described as the plot goes on, as the story progresses, as characters change. Um, I don't know if you've seen Frozen 2 yet, but at the very end of Frozen 2, which is all about the Enchanted Forest, Olaf comes out, and I love the line. He said, "Well, I don't know what transformation means, but I feel like we've all changed now." And of course, he says that right as they're leaving the Enchanted Forest. And so, forests are known as places of change, transformation. Somehow, you are going to leave a forest or a wood, or differently than when you entered in. So I just want, you to think through what are some of your favorite descriptions. Um, I personally, right here, I love it wound up to the top of the grassy knoll, now gray under the pale starry night. And there, still high above them, on a further slope, they saw the twinkling lights of a house. I love this. I love this. It describes the house. Um, we have a song here, and if we wanted to talk about visuals, we could talk about visuals. The idea that this is italics, this is in the center of the page. Um, Suddenly, this doesn't look like a normal paragraph because we have lines. Each new line starts with a sentence or a command or hey. Um, there's rhyming: water, daughter, together, weather, feather, heather. You know, those rhyming words. They're simpler syllables in this song compared to some of that's up here. So here you have a very big description of landscape, and then you have a little song as well. So Aragon doesn't necessarily have a song, but if it helps you to, think about putting these side by side and seeing what are some things that you see that are in common with them. So again, Aragon, um, I believe, was heavily inspired by Tolkien, along with Star Wars. Um, and so, just thinking about the description here, they see the house in Lord of the Rings, and then he also starts to see the house. He starts to wind through the city in his valley. So I just want you to compare and contrast in this video. That is, you've got where's the sentence I want? When he arrived at the bottom, soft dusk was creeping over everywhere, blurring colors and shapes into gray masses. I mean, that's a beautiful description as well. And so, compare the two, think about how descriptive it is. Um, how does that affect the tone? We get a very eerie sense in Lord of the Rings right here on my left. And here on the right, what sort of feelings do you have as a reader as well? So think about the language. Is it difficult? Is it easy? Are they long words? Are they short words? Do they make you think of anything else? Like I said with Lord of the Rings, talking about the gnarled, knobby faces, me thinking of, Snow White and her running through um, the the woods in that film. And so, you know, thinking about with the tone, how do you feel? How do you think the characters feel? Discuss all of that stuff. Again, I want a total of 150 words. I don't want you to summarize, but I do want you to tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't like about this particular reading in between the lines. So, right from here to the green line to the red line right here. So, I want you to reflect. What did you like? What did you not like? Analyze. Who do you think it was written for? Who is the audience here? What's the tone? What do you feel? What kind of words are in the reading? What are they trying to do? Those kinds of things. I look forward to reading your reflection. Depending on how your practice, depending on how this practice goes, I may have us do a bit of a Zoom meeting together. I might, not necessarily will, just to see if we can discuss this a little bit as a class to see if that will help, because I'm nervous. I'm nervous that we might need to spend more individual attention to these. So, all right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.